A small piece of clay. Something so ordinary that most people would walk past it without a second glance. But what if I told you it carries a message from more than 4,200 years ago? One that could change everything we think we know about human history, and what comes next is even more disturbing. Because this is not just clay. This is one of the oldest recorded voices of civilization itself, carved in a language that most of the world forgot existed, Sumerian. And what it contains is not just writing, but something that feels like a direct window into another world. And you're about to see why that matters more than you think. These Sumerian tablets are considered the earliest known written records in human history. Not just objects stored in museums, but actual messages from civilization that existed long before Egypt, Greece, or Rome even began to form. And yet, what if we've been reading them completely wrong all along? Because there exists a claim, a hidden footage that was never meant for public eyes, featuring a man who dedicated his entire life to decoding these ancient symbols. Samuel Noah Kramer, at the age of 91, sitting alone. And what he says in that moment changes everything, but only if you understand the weight behind his words. He is sitting in a quiet basement in Philadelphia, surrounded by silence, so heavy it feels like time itself has stopped. Dust-filled air, ancient clay tablets stacked around him like forgotten memories of humanity. And in that moment, something feels off, as if history itself is watching him back. And then he speaks, but what he says is beyond shocking. Before I die, listen to me. We have misunderstood everything. And that is just the beginning, because the next sentence destroys decades of accepted history. For nearly 50 years, Kramer was not just a scholar. He was the authority on Sumerian civilization. Every translation, every textbook, every museum explanation was shaped by his work, meaning if he was wrong, then everything we know might collapse. But what made him say this at the end of his life? To understand that, we have to go back to where it all began. When Sumerian language was completely unknown, no dictionaries, no guides, no living speakers, nothing, just broken fragments of clay waiting to be decoded, and a young scholar trying to make sense of the impossible. Piece by piece, Kramer rebuilt a lost world, identifying symbols, comparing tablets, guessing meanings through patterns, until slowly, a language that had been silent for thousands of years started to speak again. But what it was saying was far more complex than anyone expected. Decades passed, thousands of tablets translated, and eventually, the world saw Sumer not as myth, but as the birthplace of civilization itself. Education, law, literature, even early science all traced back to these ancient people, and Kramer became the man who revealed it all. But something strange was quietly growing in his mind. At first, it was just small notes in his research, phrases like uncertain meaning. Context unclear, nothing unusual for ancient studies, but over time, those doubts started multiplying, and what began as minor uncertainty slowly turned into something much deeper. Because Kramer noticed something strange. Sumerian language didn't behave like modern language at all. It didn't separate ideas clearly. Religion, nature, daily life, the supernatural, everything was connected, flowing into each other like one continuous reality, and that made translation far more dangerous than anyone realized. Even the word we translate as God didn't always mean a physical divine being. Sometimes it felt like a force, sometimes an authority, sometimes something closer to awareness itself. And that's when the foundation of interpretation started shaking, but nobody noticed it yet. Until 1987, when Kramer said something in an interview that stunned scholars worldwide. When I translate Sumerian texts, I use words like creation or world, but I am no longer convinced the Sumerians thought in those categories. And then he stopped speaking, as if realizing something he could no longer unsee, and what he realized would change everything. Because one tablet, discovered in Nippur, dated around 2100 BC, would become the turning point of his entire career. Originally interpreted as gods giving civilization to humans, a divine gift, a story repeated in textbooks for decades, but later, He looked at it again, and everything changed. This time, he questioned every single word. Gift could also mean awakening. Human could also mean unaware being. God could also mean higher state of consciousness. And suddenly, the entire story was no longer about gods giving knowledge, but about humans awakening to something already inside them. And that realization disturbed him deeply. Because if he was right, then the entire historical narrative might be wrong. But if he was wrong, then why did the text allow this second interpretation so clearly? And that question had no easy answer. As he re-examined more tablets, a pattern started appearing. Modern interpretation was constantly forcing ancient meaning into modern categories. But Sumerian thought didn't seem to work in categories at all. It worked in layers, connections, fluid meaning, something modern language struggles to capture. And then came another shock. Sumerian civilization itself appeared suddenly in history. Fully formed cities, advanced writing, complex mathematics using base, 60 systems, precise astronomy tracking planetary cycles with extreme accuracy, and all of this emerging without gradual development, as if something had appeared fully complete, and that raised uncomfortable questions. Was it just rapid development? Or something we still don't understand about human cognition at that time? Kramer began wondering something dangerous for a scholar. What if the problem was not the ancient text, but the modern mind reading it? And as he studied later Sumerian writings, he noticed something even more disturbing. Early texts were symbolic, abstract, philosophical. But later texts became more administrative, more mechanical, more limited, as if something in human thinking itself had shifted over time. Was it political collapse, or something deeper, something cognitive, a change in how humans perceived reality itself? By the time he reached his final years, Kramer was no longer confident in simple answers. Instead, he began questioning the limits of interpretation itself. Because how do you translate a mindset that no longer exists in modern consciousness? In private reflections, he even suggested something controversial, that ancient civilizations may not have been primitive in thought, but simply different in perception, and that idea alone was enough to divide scholars. Because it challenges everything modern history is built on. Then, there was mythology. What we call myth today may not have been fiction to them at all, but a lived structure of reality. Meaning stories weren't separate from life. They were how reality itself was experienced. And if that is true, then everything we call ancient belief might actually be something much deeper, a different mode of consciousness. As Kramer aged, his certainty dissolved further. He realized language itself might not be enough to bridge the gap between ancient and modern minds, and every translation he made might actually be a reflection of modern thinking, not ancient truth. And yet, his early work still defines everything we know today. This is the paradox of Samuel Noah Kramer, the man who decoded Sumer. But the end of his life began to doubt whether it had ever truly been decoded at all. He passed away in 1990 at the age of 93, leaving behind a legacy that shaped archaeology forever, but also leaving behind uncomfortable questions that were never fully answered. And maybe that is where the real mystery begins. Because if interpretation changes with time, then history is not fixed. It is constantly rewritten by the minds trying to understand it. So the real question is not just what the Sumerians wrote, but whether we are capable of reading it the way it was meant to be read at all. And as long as those clay tablets survive in silence across museums around the world, the debate is not over. It's still ongoing, still unresolved, and maybe still not